However, when we're thinking of the British attack, the image that we have of long lines of men walking slowly forward simply isn't true. Now, Rawlinson, Haig's assistant for this attack, had suggested small, mobile columns for the initial advance deployed in waves as they go across. Now, each battalion attacked slightly differently depending on the lay of the land. Now, the attacks were slaughtered, but not because they were blindly following tactical advice from on high. Haig said it wasn't his job to tell the battalions how to attack, that was up to each individual commander. Now, the idea the British had of columns pushing through the German lines was a good one, but it was badly carried out. But the 15th and 13th Corps showed successes could be achieved, but the defences there were weaker, and the British were assisted there by the more effective French heavy guns. Now, the 13th Corps used their artillery better than most of the Corps, and they actually did use a creeping barrage, where the artillery walk in front of the infantry. Now, it has to be said, the 13th Corps creeping barrage, it's not good. It's not done well at all, but the idea is the right one, and the reason why it's not done well is they're doing this really for the first time, learning on the job. But even as the first day is a disaster, there are still a series of wasted opportunities on the first day. Now, 13th Corps achieves all its objectives, but was too exhausted to continue. Now, the German forces before 13th Corps had been all but eliminated, with only a few small pockets of German troops left in the woods to their front. But there are no reserves to use. 13th Corps has effectively torn a hole in that line, but there's no reserves to push into that gap. Rawlinson didn't want to risk overextending the British lines by being too ambitious. Now, Haig wanted to push on, but Rawlinson was overcautious. There was the 9th Division held in reserve, but it wasn't concentrated for a rapid advance. The reserves had to be concentrated behind the lines and then pushed into the gaps that had been torn. But they weren't. And the cavalry, which could have played a key role in exploiting the successes of the 13th Corps, were all held further north. The breakthrough had happened in the south, but the cavalry are deployed behind the lines in the north. They're in the wrong place. Now, Rawlinson was given messages by 13th Corps of success. 13th Corps said to Rawlinson, "We've done it. We've broken through." But he refused to believe the messages that he had received. He said that they weren't true. He said that the 13th Corps didn't understand the situation, that they were too optimistic onto what had been achieved. And so he refused to send the cavalry south. Now, even as late as the 3rd of July, 2 days later, the door is still wide open. Lieutenant Colonel Maxwell, a man who I have a huge respect for, he led a reconnaissance in strength, and he managed to get 2 miles in front of the British front lines, desperately trying to find out actually where were the Germans. And he reported back that a hole had indeed been punched, and that hole was there for 2 days. But the cavalry were not pushed, and nor were the 9th Infantry pushed into the gap. Now, the French had been more successful, helped by a river mist that had obscured their attack, small woods, and a series of folds in the ground that had given them cover from the machine gun fire. And of course they had a lot more artillery and, crucially, the heavy guns. Also, their troops are pre-war conscripts that are fully trained. Now, by the 3rd, they had taken Frise, Herbecourt, Assavilliers, and they were poised on the plains of Flancourt. They had achieved complete surprise. The Germans really didn't believe the French had a fight left into them, and so they'd been expecting the British to attack, but not the French. Falkenhayn believed that after Verdun there was no way a French division could attack. The Germans had to evacuate in front of the French, their second line, and only a thin line of Germans lay between the French army and the key road and rail junction at Peronne. Now, the French general, a man called Fayolle, he wanted to smash through this third line. Now, had he done so, the German left flank would have been turned, and the Germans would have been forced to withdraw from the Somme. The British and French are right at the point where the Somme might be remembered as a bloody victory. just need to break through that third line. Now, he asks Joffre, can I attack? Can I break through the third line? Joffre delays and delays making a decision, and then his assistant, a man called Foch, refuses. He says, no, you can't. The British are to take the lead in this. The French generals are fed up of the French bleeding for the alliance, and they think that the British now need to take their turn. And so, although they are poised on the very cusp of victory, they decide not to attack. Now, Foch in particular believed that trench warfare was the key to victory, and believed that Fayolle was far too keen to break out of the trenches. And so, by the time the French do start to probe at these lines, and it's too late. The gap has been plugged. And on the 3rd of July, Haig and Joffre fall out over this French refusal to advance. And that's a further disaster, as the British and French now stop trusting each other completely. Haig and Joffre can't stand each other at this stage, and from now on, Britain and France will be fighting two entirely separate battles upon the Somme, and that's not going to help. Now, from the 2nd to the 13th of July, the British Army inch forward. On the 2nd of July, Fricourt falls. On the 3rd of July, La Boisselle is captured. From the 3rd to the 13th of July, the British launch 41 separate attacks, with another 25,000 British casualties. But these attacks, they're piecemeal, they're poorly prepared, they're hastily arranged, badly thought out. British troops are used in penny packets, being sent here and there, and artillery from neighbouring units refuse to fire to support their neighbouring units. The British Army is shocked by the scale of the casualties they've suffered on the first day, and so now each unit is looking after itself, only using its heavy guns to support themselves, and if they're not attacking, their heavy guns stay silent, while the units to their right or to their left go into the attack. It's a disastrous waste of life for 11 days. But then we have the Battle of the Contalmaison amphitheatre. Now, it had been undefended by the Germans on the 3rd, but the British had failed to take it. They had failed to occupy the unclaimed ground. They waited until the Germans had, in fact, taken the Contalmaison amphitheatre, and then the British attacked it 3 times, on the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th of July. But they attacked by frontal assaults on the amphitheatre, and frontal assaults were never going to succeed. By the 10th of July, the neighbouring division had managed to take Contalmaison village and Mametz Wood, unlocking the amphitheatre's defences and allowing the position to be taken. And so the German first line had been finally cleared, bloodily and costly. Slowly, a clumsy assault, but the German first line has been taken, and now the British must think again on how to assault the German second line.